Hello, everyone. I'm Jasmine Bruno. Today's discussion is about English language learners' landmark cases, intersectionality in law, language, and the right to learn. We will begin by exploring the judicial responses towards English language learners and their educational rights. Landmark cases have played a crucial role in shaping policies that ensure equitable education for English language learners. These legal decisions address issues such as funding, language access, and the rights of non English speaking students, thereby creating a more inclusive educational environment. Let's understand the definition and importance of ELL. ELL stands for English Language Learners. These are students who are non native speakers of English and require specialized instruction to achieve proficiency. Their importance in the educational system is often underscored by the unique challenges they face, such as language barriers, cultural differences, and the need for tailored educational strategies as well as supportive policies to ensure their academic success. Let's start off with the first landmark case, Rodriguez versus San Antonio Independent School District of 1973. Demetrio Rodriguez versus San Antonio Independent School District case challenged the constitutionality of the Texas school finance system, which resulted in significant disparities in funding across districts, according to Demetrio Rodriguez. However, the Supreme Court ruled contrary, a 5-4 decision that deemed that education is not a fundamental right under the Constitution, leading to ongoing debates about equitable funding for ELL programs. As the Val acknowledged, following this verdict, there is clearly no constitutional right to bilingual education. Judge Lewis F. Powell Jr. concluded the following premises as the majority opinion. One, wealth is not a suspect classification. Two, education is not a fundamental right under the Constitution. And three, there was no clearly defined class of poor people harmed by the system. This was his philosophy, along with many others during this era regarding this case. However, case two, Lau versus Nichols, 1974, gives us a glimmer of hope. This was a pivotal Supreme Court case that addressed the educational rights of non English speaking students in San Francisco. The court ruled that failing to provide English language instruction violated the Civil Rights Act of 1964, thereby mandating schools to take affirmative steps to support ELL students' needs versus the sink or swim policy to ensure primarily Chinese American students were receiving equitable treatment in alignment to other student demographics. So the sink or swim policy pretty much had the view of either you discover a way to learn English and you pass, or you just fail because you don't understand it at all. Justice William Douglas proclaimed the majority opinion during this time as, quote, under these state imposed standards, there is no equality of treatment merely by providing students with the same facilities, textbooks, teachers, and curriculum. For students who do not understand English are effectively foreclosed from any meaningful education. We know that those who do not understand English are certain to find their classroom experiences wholly incomprehensible and in no way meaningful. The law remedies were then created, whereas identification and evaluation, instructional design, mainstream readiness, professional standards, and bilingual mandates all entered this case to resolve this issue. Case number three, Castaneda versus Pickard, 1981. This was a landmark case in Texas that really set a critical framework for assessing bilingual education programs. Pretty much the court ruled that educational programs must relate to this three-pronged method. They must be based on sound educational theory, implemented effectively, and regularly evaluated for effectiveness, ensuring that ELL students, especially many Mexican Americans during this time, received quality instruction and support. Case 4, Plyer versus Doe, 1982, added another layer when it came to immigration. The Supreme Court ruled that states cannot deny undocumented children to public education. And it affirmed that regardless of their immigration status, they are entitled to a free public education, which significantly impacted ELL students. However, prior, the discriminatory Texas law of 1975, they were pretty much denying enrollments of by allowing school districts to refuse enrollment to undocumented immigrant children, and also implementing funding cuts to those who were providing education to undocumented students. Additionally, financial barriers forced undocumented families to pay tuition while other children attended school for free. That's when the legal challenge came into play, where there was a class action lawsuit featuring 4 undocumented immigrant families against a Texas school district. And the argument from the families was that this law violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment within the Constitution. Therefore, the claim of discrimination challenged the state's unfair practice of denying access based on status. Of course, which reiterated that access is guaranteed to all children, whether they're undocumented or not. And the core principle is more so that they are entitled to a free public education. So this pretty much expanded the protections and resources for ELLs nationwide. Case 5, fast forward to Flores versus Arizona, 2000. Flores versus Arizona was a pivotal case that scrutinized the funding provisions for English language learners programs in Arizona. The court's decision mandated that the state must provide sufficient resources to ensure that ELL students receive a quality education, setting a precedent for funding obligations in language instruction. That case paved the way for Williams versus California 2004, whereas now the court additionally ruled not only should ELL programs be funded, but California must provide adequate materials and qualified teachers. This led to significant reforms within funding and resource allocation for ELL programs and students not having to have rundown books or people who were not certified and so forth. So, overall, the impact of landmark cases on ELL policies: increased federal funding allocations, implemented more ELL program standards, legalized protections for ELL students, and continuously advocates for equitable resources. The current trends in ELL education are culturally responsive teaching methods, use of digital tools, focus on social emotional skills, personalized learning approaches, and collaborative learning environments. Now, let's fast forward to what's happening now in modern day America. Learning on thin ice, how enforcement freezes academic progress for English language learners. The chilling effects. So there was a study in Florida whereas authors found that increased immigration policing at the beginning of 2025 dragged down test scores for Hispanic students as well as U.S. and foreign-born Spanish-speaking students. These negative effects were significant and more striking in higher poverty middle and high schools. Spanish-speaking students with lower test scores in 2024 and female students were also more likely to be affected. So this was not only a chilling effect physically for students who are trying to literally attend school, but it was also psychological warfare because some ELL students were having the fear of being deported whether they were from here or not within the United States. Methodology and scope. 1. The data of the study focused on 30% of the population being Spanish speaking. The catalyst, number 2, was a 50% surge in ICE immigration and customs enforcement arrests during the 2025 enforcement ramp up. And 3, the metric, correlating apprehension intensity with localized student test scores. So there was a survey on the amount of fear and a juxtaposed study that pretty much evaluated how fear was impacting students' test scores in a very negative way. The major finding here, though, was that status doesn't matter. By tracking a large Florida school district, researchers found that heightened ICE activity significantly lowered test scores for both U.S.-born and foreign-born Spanish-speaking students. This suggests that the trauma of community surveillance and the fear of family separation create systematic educational barriers that transcend a student's individual legal status. So, who's the most vulnerable during this time? Academic declines peaked among female students, those in high poverty middle and high schools, and those with lower baseline scores. Impact most severe in schools with high concentrations of students from primarily Central America. They were from countries such as Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Disciplinary incidents dropped not due to better behavior, but as a survival strategy for students to quote unquote stay under the radar and protect their families. So ultimately, ELL students' attendance went downhill because of apprehensiveness and once again the fear of being deported or mistreated in a vile manner. Another quote, and as study author David Figalio remarked in an interview, school leaders across the country are going to have to confront the fact that regardless of immigration status, this is affecting the human capital and academic performance of a large group of students. The scope of this impact cannot be understated as there are 14.4 million Latino children enrolled in public K through 12 schools and an estimated 4.71 million U.S. citizen children have an undocumented parent at home. Let's check out this 2025 clip from Fox 11 Los Angeles in regards to ICE agents at schools.
Local schools are bracing for federal immigration agents. A new Trump executive order allows agents to enter schools.
Now, local districts are now preparing for plans to protect students and staff if enforcement happens. Fox 11's Christy Fajardo live in Encino with the update. Christy?
Christina and Marla, at this point, no one knows if, when, or where customs officials might go to schools to make arrests. But the LAUSD says they have a professional and ethical obligation to protect students' right to an education, both under the state and also U.S. Constitution. The LAUSD calls them red cards, and they detail people's rights if they are visited by immigration officers. And this week, they went home with students at this Encino school, including Andy's daughter.
I think it's very important. People should know about what are the rights.
The cards come as President Trump has signed an executive order which clears the way for federal officers to enter schools to enforce immigration laws. The policy is popular with the president's supporters who have called for mass deportations. But as schools around Southern California and throughout the nation struggling to balance the law and students' rights.
I need to contact our superintendent's office.
That's why Santa Ana Unified School District in Orange County produced this training video.
Record officer's name, badge number,
to let school staff know what steps to follow if immigration and customs enforcement, or ICE, comes to campus.
We do have a protocol in place where we would not let them in without a warrant.
The district says it doesn't track students' immigration status, and the Supreme Court ruled in the 80s that all children, even those who are undocumented, have a right to a public education.
We also want to make it clear that schools are not a place for enforcement, that our children are very young. And this could be a very traumatic experience for students, not only students who might be a target of enforcement, but students who just might witness some of this enforcement.
The LAUSD is also training staff on procedures, and both districts are trying to reassure parents during what they acknowledge are uncertain times. We also reached out to other large school districts in our area, including one in San Bernardino, which did not get back to us. Irvine Unified, however, told us they're still waiting on state guidance.
So overall, the struggle for ELL rights is ongoing as we continue to advocate for equitable education for all students. ELL students' language is not only being weaponized, however, their culture and identities as well. ELL students are having to face ethnocentric views that only consider people outside of who they are and not the fair all American dream that everyone should have in regards to having a free and appropriate public education. Thank you so much. These are my references. I hope you enjoyed. Take care.